Revealed, how an incredible Mafia boss transformed a homeless teacher's life in a snowy encounter. Jonathan hugged his threadbare coat tighter around himself, the biting wind slicing through the library doors as he sought solace among the dusty pages of forgotten tomes. He used to command attention in a classroom filled with eager faces, inspiring them with stories of heroes and integrity, but now he was reduced to a ghost among the shelves. A once respected history teacher turned homeless in a city that seemed to walk past him without a second look. A winter storm ravaged Chicago, each snowflake whispering reminders of lost chances and faded dreams. As the lights flickered, illuminating the old, wooden shelves, Jonathan ruminated over the choices that had stripped him of life's essentials. He could still hear his students echoing his lessons on courage and resilience, but how could he teach them anything when his own life was in disarray? The weight of his idealism pressed heavily on him, collective failures overlapping like snowdrifts blocking paths forward. He felt both desperate and determined, a push and pull between his conviction and the stark reality of his predicament. His thoughts were interrupted by the stark presence of Serafino, a towering figure wrapped in a luxurious overcoat that seemed almost out of place against the array of worn-out books. Here was a man whose reputation filled the Chicago streets, both feared and respected, a Mafia boss associated with the darker dealings of survival. As he locked onto Jonathan's shabby shoes and threadbare gloves, curiosity flickered in Serafino's steely gaze, perhaps remnants of his own past struggles reflected back at him. "They say it's a rough winter," Serafino remarked, a hint of genuine concern breaking through his otherwise hardened exterior. Jonathan hesitated, caught off guard, as the world outside felt alien, while here was a man who could either provide judgment or, perhaps, unexpected understanding. "Yeah, it's cold," Jonathan mumbled, warmth emanating from the library, yet feeling further away than the city outside. Would he dare to share his story, to confess inner turmoil? What fears lay embedded in his heart? Would he risk a sliver of dignity by conversing with someone representing the outskirts of morality? It seemed unthinkable to accept help from a figure cloaked in the shadows of crime, yet the allure of an opportunity to reclaim his life shimmered like the snowflakes outside. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. As they conversed, the disparities in their lives unraveled. Jonathan's steadfast principles of education and ethics were at odds with Serafino's metal-graded survival mindset. The deeper they dug into their contrasting worlds, the more Jonathan's sense of abandonment surfaced, mixing with the gnawing resentment of a life that had slipped through his fingers. Anguish bubbled inside him, a desire to return to teaching collided with the suffocating truth of reality. It was then Serafino made an offer that sent Jonathan's heart racing, a lifeline hidden in the murky waters of morality. A chance to teach again, in a community Serafino himself funded. Excitement warred with dread. Could he really accept a lifeline from a man tied to questionable integrity? Torn between pride and survival, Jonathan felt the icy tendrils of doubt wrap around him, squeezing tightly. As the snow continued to blanket the city, Jonathan stood at the brink, an unexpected intersection of their lives loaded with overwhelming choices, standing tall like a skyscraper on the Chicago skyline. His pulse quickened, caught in the grip of desperation and hope, feeling the shadows of Serafino pressing on him, igniting an internal tempest in search of redemption. In this moment, the question hung thick in the air: would choosing to embrace this new path unravel the values he had spent a lifetime cultivating, or would it reignite the spark he so longed to feel? The possibilities felt as vast and cold as the winter night, leaving both men poised on their respective cliffs, hearts racing beneath the heavy snow. Jonathan's gaze remained locked on Serafino's unwavering expression, grappling with the weight of the offer that simmered between them. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears, a reminder of the precarious cliff he stood on, suspended between the past and an uncertain future. He had sworn to uphold certain values, yet here was an opportunity to ignite his passion for teaching once more, a beacon flickering amidst the relentless storm. The idea of teaching again made his pulse race not just for the profession itself, but for the chance at salvation from a life steeped in despair. But accepting aid from Serafino, a man wrapped in the shadows of crime, raised questions that tumbled around Jonathan's mind like snowflakes in the wind. Was survival worth compromising his ethics? Would he be trading one prison for another? He inhaled deeply, recalling rich experiences that had once filled a classroom with eager learners, their eyes wide with wonder as he breathed life into historic narratives. "It's not just a job for me," Jonathan finally spoke, his voice landing hesitantly against the wooden shelves. "Teaching is a part of who I am." "Then reclaim that part," Serafino replied, his tone both inviting and commanding, each word designed to penetrate Jonathan's armor of hesitation. "You can build something from this. You can influence lives, make a difference. Isn't that worth something?" The warmth in Serafino's voice contrasted with Jonathan's internal chill. Could he truly make an impact in a community financed by illicit means? Doubt crept in. He envisioned the students he once taught, their potential untapped and their futures imperiled. Was he simply exchanging principles for opportunities? The echo of his former self felt foreign yet invigorating, prompting a realization that teaching could cultivate hope not just for others, but also for himself. As Jonathan wrestled with his emotions, memories flooded back the passionate debates in the classroom, the spark in students' eyes as they discussed historical figures who had faced oppression and dominated against the odds. These moments had forged his identity, even when circumstances had eroded it. But could he invoke that same inspiration while tethered to a man like Serafino? Jonathan stood and faced Serafino, who appeared completely composed, analyzing Jonathan's struggle. With resolve, Jonathan began to rationalize his decision. Perhaps this venture could allow him to navigate murky waters without succumbing to their depths. Teaching in Serafino's community could be infused with his ideals, transforming dark shadows into light. "I might accept," Jonathan finally declared, attempting to steady his resolve. "But I need to create a curriculum that aligns with my values. I won't teach kids fear or chaos." A glimmer of approval flashed across Serafino's eyes, yet shadows still lingered in the air. Jonathan felt a territory forming a delicate balance between integrity and compromise. "As you wish," Serafino acknowledged, his approval mingled with an underlying challenge. "You go in with your vision, I'll provide the resources. But be warned, it's not all clean." A shiver coursed through Jonathan at the weight of Serafino's words. The thrilling yet treacherous path ahead was slowly unfurling, demanding he brace for an uphill battle with himself as much as with the environment he was about to enter. The search for redemption had begun, but it was clear that this path would be paved with internal conflicts and moral ambiguity. As they concluded their conversation, Jonathan stepped back into the icy embrace of the world outside, feeling the winds toss against him, unrelenting. The decision lay coiled at his feet, pulsating with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Would he emerge from this new chapter not just as a teacher, but as a man who rediscovered his worth amidst an intricate web of right and wrong? The moment he crossed the library threshold, a sudden flurry of wind whispered through the streets, carrying with it the weight of an unaddressed feeling. But what he didn't know was that this journey was only just beginning. There were forces at play that would expose much more than Jonathan was prepared to face. The fabric of his identity was about to unravel, revealing connections that would challenge everything he thought he understood about redemption and responsibility. The city streets were alive with shadows, the day's fading light casting eerie shapes against the rising darkness. Jonathan felt the chill seep into his bones as he walked, contemplating the gravity of his decision. Each step brought back flashes of the joys of teaching the minds he had nurtured and the lives he had transformed. Yet, he couldn't shake off the unease that accompanied the prospect of working under Serafino's influence. It felt like stepping into a fog where he could no longer see the ground beneath him. He found himself drawn toward the small cafe where he had often sought refuge with a steaming cup of coffee and the comforting embrace of familiar faces. With each push of the door, the warmth enveloped him, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. He chose a corner table, alleviating the dimness and uncertainty swirling in his mind. Sipping the coffee, he watched the barista interact with customers, their smiles genuine and untainted by the darkness of the world outside. It struck him, could he cultivate that same sincerity in a classroom? Could he inspire students to find their voices amid chaos? As these questions circulated, an ember of determination flickered. This was not merely a chance to reclaim his profession, it was an opportunity to sculpt resilience in young hearts. With newfound fervor, Jonathan reached for his notebook, laying fresh paper against the table's surface. What began as scattered thoughts soon morphed into an outline for a curriculum that blended critical thinking with ethical reflection. Historical figures would become case studies, not just figures in time but lessons in morality and courage. He jotted down names and ideas, reliving the potent dialogues that had once animated his classes. Yet amid this excitement, a nagging doubt tugged at him. What voices would he serve once inside that classroom? Could his curriculum withstand the harsh scrutiny of Serafino's world? He envisioned parents who had fought against the tide of malaise, wanting nothing more than a fighting chance for their children, and he felt a dual sinking. Would he betray their trust? Or would he find a way to navigate between these conflicting realities? The café's bustle faded into the background as Jonathan wrestled with this moral bifurcation, his mind a battlefield between survival and principle. How could he teach integrity in a setting intertwined with dubious foundations? The thought was unsettling, and the boiling emotions trapped in his chest urged him to formulate a plan robust enough to withstand the scrutiny of his conscience. After hours of contemplation and relentless brainstorming, Jonathan leaned back, the warmth of the café locking over him like a blanket. He had crafted an intricate framework, one that would require the support and patience of the community. It would not merely be a curriculum, it would be a declaration of intent, a manifesto for his students to live boldly, learning alongside their own aspirational arcs resilience, courage, and integrity. Leaving the café, Jonathan felt lighter, yet the somber weight of Serafino's world loomed large. His exciting vision felt as precarious as a house of cards, vulnerable to the outside winds. In the depths of night, Jonathan retraced his steps to the library, hoping to find solace and guidance amidst its rows of wisdom. Yet as he entered, a fading light caught his eye. This time, it was not only the light of knowledge calling. It was the sharp reflection of something more sinister, something lingering within the pages of a forgotten history, and its whispers bordered on threats. The realization hit his past, and the looming complexities of the future formed a tight knot that needed to be unraveled. What awaited Jonathan back in Serafino's world? The moment of truth was drawing closer, leaving him to question whether he could maintain his resolve when confronted by the shadows of his pact. As he sensed the tightening grip of these unforeseen consequences, he whispered to himself, "What am I prepared to sacrifice to be both teacher and man?" And deep down, Jonathan knew the next step would demand more than intellect and passion. It would test the very foundation of his character, setting him on a collision course with fate and his own deepest fears. Jonathan stood amidst the towering shelves of the library, the scent of aged paper and ink hanging in the air like a comforting shroud. He had always found clarity among the texts, but this time, the quiet ambience felt tense, almost stifling. The specter of Serafino loomed larger than any character in the novel surrounding him. It was a reminder of the complexities ahead. He meandered through the aisles, scanning titles as if answers would leap out at him, desperate for guidance. Each book carried a promise, stories of triumph, morality challenged, and characters shaped in the crucible of truth. Yet, he knew that inspiration alone wouldn't stave off the dilemmas he faced. He paused, his fingers brushing over the well-worn spines of the history section. Plutarch, Machiavelli, names that echoed through his conscience, each a metaphorical lurking shadow he must revitalize for his class. His heart racing, Jonathan pulled out a volume on classical political philosophy. Could the lessons of the past illuminate his situation? After all, he was caught in a labyrinth of choices, and navigation required both wisdom and courage. He flipped through the pages, captivated by the ideas of ethical leadership and the responsibilities of those in power. Perhaps there was a path to articulate ethical dilemmas to his students, constructing a narrative that wouldn't fall prey to Serafino's influence. Yet the recurring notion of betrayal gnawed at him, weaving through his thoughts. How could he advocate for integrity when the very framework he operated within was riddled with corruption? The question loomed larger, an insistent drumbeat in the background of his mind. Would he be seen as a fraud, or worse a coward, advocating for ideals while tethered to a system he rejected? As he paced between the shelves, a sudden noise startled him, a hushed conversation creeping through the stillness. He advanced cautiously toward the sound, the voices drawing him like a moth to a flame. The voices belonged to two figures hunched over a table in the far corner, illuminated by a weak overhead light. Their visible tension hinted at something larger, secrets traded under the cloak of silence. Maintaining a respectful distance, Jonathan lingered, his heartbeat intensifying. Every word exchanged between them felt laden with mistrust, their talk wrapping tightly around familiar names, including Serafino. "Can we trust him?" one whispered vehemently. "Last time, he turned on us." Jonathan's gut twisted at the mention of Serafino's name. It made the reality of his own involvement painfully clear. He realized that his association with a man of Serafino's ilk had repercussions that could easily drag others into chaotic unknowns. The implications were unsettling, sending tremors of anxiety coursing through him. Jonathan stepped back, the implications of overhearing this conversation crystallizing into a deeper resolve. If Serafino was capable of betrayal, how could he, Jonathan, construct a curriculum focused on trust in a learning community? It demanded more than simply avoiding the pitfalls of corruption, it called for absolute devotion to the integrity he wished to instill in his students. Yet with his world entwined in uncertain loyalties, how could he find a footing that allowed him to remain upright? He exited the library, the cool night air piercing through the fog of anxiety that had enveloped him inside. Clarity struck him. It was time to confront Serafino directly, not from a place of anger, but a place of strategic foresight. Perhaps a discussion could unveil the man behind the Mafia facade, unearth humanity amid the shadows. As he calculated his approach, uncertainty flickered within. What could he reveal, and what must he withhold to maintain his mission? The crossroads before him teetered on the verge of confrontation, the tension thickened in the air as he understood the stakes of this dialogue. Unearthing more questions than answers, Jonathan marched forward, a steely determination igniting in his chest. Would his courage bear fruit, or would it spiral him deeper into darkness? He realized that the true test of his character had begun, not just as an educator, but as a man wrestling with the demand for virtue in a world that seemed all too eager to sacrifice it. Yet beneath the determination stirred a nagging fear. What if confronting Serafino opened doors better left shut? The next encounter loomed like a tempest on the horizon, and Jonathan braced himself for the storm ahead. As the shadows deepened, he whispered to the night, "Which side will I choose? The man I wish to be, or the world that seeks to shape me?" The biting chill of the night air nipped at Jonathan's skin as he walked briskly toward the street corner where he had agreed to meet Serafino. His breath formed small clouds that hovered momentarily, then dissipated into the void of the evening. Each step felt heavy, burdened by the gravity of his fate. He was not merely walking toward a confrontation, he was marching into a battleground where ideals clashed starkly with reality. As he approached the meeting point, a stark street lamp illuminated the scene. The glow did little to warm the air, but it provided an eerie spotlight on Serafino, who leaned casually against a nearby lamppost. He exuded a charisma that belied the danger he represented, smirk dancing across his lips as he spotted Jonathan's approach. Jonathan's pulse quickened, he felt as though he were stepping into a den of wolves. "Jonathan," Serafino greeted, his voice smooth, equal parts silk and steel. "You're brave to come here." There was a part of Jonathan that wanted to respond with wit, to diffuse the tension with sarcasm, but he couldn't afford that luxury. Instead, he steadied his breath and met Serafino's gaze. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steadier than he felt inside. "Ah, the language of necessity," Serafino replied, pushing himself off the lamppost and moving closer. "What's troubling you?" Heard any interesting things in that library of yours? Jonathan's mind raced. The whispers he had overheard throbbed at the forefront of his thoughts, the accusations, the implications. I want to understand your operations. The implications of your activities, they affect my students and the community. Interesting. Serafino folded his arms, an amused glint in his eye. You think you can lecture me on morality? You're swimming in waters you don't quite comprehend, my friend. Jonathan's heart sank at the challenge behind his words. He took a step forward, fueled by a blend of fear and determination. He wouldn't back down. I'm not here to judge. I merely want to grasp the combative nature of your reign and how it shapes the lives of those around you. If I understand you, perhaps I can protect my students from your influence. A cruel smile cracked Serafino's demeanor. Protection? You make me sound like some monster out of a children's tale. You think they're innocent? The question hit like a physical blow. Jonathan wrestled with the truth. Did he believe his students were untouched by the world's chaos, or had he been naive to the harsh realities they faced? His idealism felt fragile as he confronted the shadows looming over those lives. Their innocence is a possibility, Serafino, Jonathan replied, trying to steady himself against the storm of doubts that swirled within his mind. But your presence, your darkness compromises that possibility. Can you even feel the consequences of your choices? Every choice has a price, Jonathan, Serafino said, his tone shifting from mirth to something sharper. You're playing with fire here, and you do well to remember that passion often leads to regret. Regret. The word echoed in Jonathan's chest, mingling with fear and clarity. He had ventured into uncertain territory, yet he felt a crucial resolve solidifying within him. You're right about one thing. We all have choices to make. As Jonathan's words hung in the air, he sensed a flicker of something in Serafino's eyes, a hint of respect or resentment. This man stood on the precipice of potential, far from the caricature of evil Jonathan had constructed in his mind. I will not be dictated by you or your choices, Jonathan declared, voice ringing with the newfound strength of his convictions. I will fight for the moral compass that my students deserve, even if that path is treacherous. Serafino's expression shifted, revealing a flicker of admiration laced with caution. Maybe there's more to you than I thought, Jonathan. That acknowledgement ignited a fervor within Jonathan. This conversation was no longer about merely defying Serafino, it had transformed into an exploration of redemption, a test of values that extended far beyond their current clash. He wasn't defeated yet, the battle for integrity within education was a fight worth pursuing. As the unsettling night deepened around them, Jonathan knew he was standing at a crossroads. Would he emerge from this encounter emboldened or irrevocably changed? Without the answers clearly visible, he felt drawn to a profound realization: the true war was within himself, against complacency and the specter of moral weakness that lingered ever so close. Then tell me, Serafino, do you believe a man can change? Jonathan asked, each word filled with weight and an unquenchable curiosity. The silence stretched, tension hanging now between them like an unbreakable thread, and Jonathan sensed the inevitable confrontation lingering somewhere just beneath the surface, ready to leap forth. His journey had only just begun, and every step mattered. Would he find strength in the chaos around him or drown in the depths of uncertainty? Jonathan's heart raced as Serafino's gaze pierced through the darkness, laden with unspoken threats. The air felt electric, steeped in tension as Jonathan searched for the right words. He had entered this conversation hoping to learn, to protect his students and himself, but now he sensed the delicate balance between understanding and compromise was threatening to tip. Change? Serafino echoed, his voice laced with skepticism. What is there to change when you face the world as it truly is? A man is shaped by his choices, and my choices are what bring power. Jonathan's mind churned with that notion. Could power really act as the only constant in a man's life? His thoughts momentarily drifted to his students, their potential tangled in the web of Serafino's influence, and the thought ignited a storm of defiance within him. He straightened his posture, feeling a sudden surge of determination. I refuse to believe that power is the only path available. There's more at play than just control and influence. Your grip on this neighborhood doesn't have to define a person, Serafino, he said, each word flowing from a wellspring of conviction that surprised even him. Serafino regarded him with an arch of an eyebrow, the ghost of a smile creeping back onto his face. How charming. An idealist with delusions of grandeur. Tell me, what makes a teacher think he can change the nature of a man who was born into this life? The question gripped at Jonathan's throat. This was the conundrum he wrestled with daily. Could education, a beacon of hope, truly counter the shadows lurking within societal corruption? Perhaps it's not about changing you but reaching those who can be saved, he replied, feeling the weight of each syllable resonate in the cold air. There had to be a proud defiance present, something within him wanted to emerge unscathed. Serafino stepped closer, inches from Jonathan's face, the chill of the night air whispered around them like a spectral audience to an impending duel. His voice softened. If you are to venture on this noble quest of yours, you better learn the rules of engagement. The system is a game, and you're incredibly naive if you think you can play it without learning how to wield your advantages. The coldness of Serafino's words seeped into Jonathan's bones. The truth of them lingered, igniting a fire under his skin. In that moment, he understood that he had to redefine his strategy. Education wasn't enough, he would need information, connections, and a way to navigate the murky waters of Serafino's world without compromising his principles. What do you propose? Jonathan asked, knowing he was treading on risky ground. He felt like a tightrope walker, desperately trying to maintain balance while inching closer to the edge. Serafino leaned back, the corner of his mouth quirking upwards. You seem to have spirit. I might consider bringing you into my inner circle, but understand this: I don't play the hero. You want to help your precious students? Then prepare to get your hands dirty. A surge of revulsion gripped Jonathan. Could he risk tarnishing his integrity under the guise of noble intentions? But beneath the waves of his unease, he felt a burgeoning curiosity. This was the very man who shaped lives without touching them, the puppeteer of fate, and maybe, just maybe, Jonathan could learn how to use those strings to weave a better reality for his students. Teach me, he said, his voice steady. You'll find I'm more than just a naive educator. I can be an ally, but only if it aligns with the good you seem to mock. Serafino's laughter rang out, slicing through the chill. You really are a piece of work, Jonathan. Very well, let us see how well you can adapt. I can arrange a way for you to see what lies beneath the surface. As the word settled, Jonathan sensed that he was on the brink of a metamorphosis. This alliance seemed fraught with peril but also with potential. His resistance shifted into an adaptability he hadn't recognized before. Yet as he contemplated the moral implications of his choices, a shadow loomed in the back of his mind. Would he lose his way in the darkness he sought to explore? Don't squander this opportunity, Serafino warned, stepping back into the shadows. The next time we meet, have answers to my questions or prepare to be left in the frost of your own morality. The threat lingered, heavy in the cold night air. Jonathan felt a surge of adrenaline at the crossroads he now faced. It wasn't merely about standing firm against Serafino, it was about becoming an agent of change while wrestling with the depths of his own ethical framework. Determined, he nodded. Then I'll start preparing. I won't be just a bystander. I'll learn how to navigate the chaos and find a way to emerge unscathed, for them. As Serafino turned and walked into the impenetrable night, Jonathan knew he had crossed a threshold. The real transformation had begun, but at what cost? The path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, a new guiding force whispering within him. With every step forward, Jonathan understood, the perilous battle ahead wasn't only against Serafino's influence, but perhaps, even more compellingly, against the shadows gathering within himself, a fight for his soul, just as much as for those he sought to protect. What unsuspected challenges awaited him in this new alliance? That thought thrummed with urgency in his mind. He wasn't done yet, the true struggle was just beginning. Jonathan stood alone in the frigid night, the echo of Serafino's laughter fading like a distant storm. The encounter had left him unsettled but charged, the weight of the man's proposition curling around his thoughts like smoke. What did it mean to adapt? To change oneself for the sake of others? He felt a pull to Serafino's world, a world where power and manipulation reigned, but the specter of losing his moral compass loomed large. As dawn broke and the first light spilled into his modest apartment, Jonathan wrestled with the thoughts that flickered behind his eyelids. The notion of forging an alliance with someone like Serafino was both a terrifying gamble and an enticing opportunity. Could he really navigate this dark landscape without being consumed by it? That day at school, he moved through the halls like a ghost, offering smiles and encouragement to his students while wrestling with the storm inside. Every familiar face reminded him of why he had made the choice to teach, to create a bridge between potential and possibility. Yet, with Serafino's looming influence, he felt that bridge as well as his own reality rapidly shifting beneath him. He stared out the classroom window, observing the students milling about, laughing and chatting. Their laughter was a pleasant bait, pulling him from his descent into doubt. It was time to redefine his approach. Empowerment through education needed allies, and it was imperative to understand the larger game at play. After school, he found himself in a nearby cafe, the air thick with the rich aroma of coffee. As he sipped his drink, his gaze fell upon a group of local leaders engaging in hushed conversation. Their confident demeanors and subtle gestures whispered of connections he had only ever vaguely understood. Perhaps, he thought, this was a pathway to securing the information and resources he needed. Taking a deep breath, Jonathan approached them, awkward yet compelled. "Excuse me," he said, forcing his voice to steady. "I'm looking to collaborate with local leaders on educational initiatives. Would you be willing to share insight on how you navigate the community?" They paused, surprised by his boldness, but when they began talking, Jonathan listened intently. Their dialogue revealed a web of relationships, favors, and obligations. Casual suggestions transformed into concrete strategies, and Jonathan began to grasp the intricacies of alliances. Each moment felt like a stepping stone further into the labyrinth he had once only observed. Emboldened, he sought out Serafino that evening with fresh clarity. "I've thought about your offer," he said, encountering the mobster at a secluded bar. "I want to learn, not just from you, but from those around you. I want to see how power is wielded, and how I might pivot that knowledge toward education." Serafino regarded him, eyes glimmering with a mix of amusement and appraisal. "You've got fire. Let us see if you can keep it alive. But be warned, what you seek comes with a price. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to justify your choices." Jonathan absorbed the gravity of Serafino's words, feeling the implications of his journey crystallize into painful focus. Was he prepared to lose himself, to wrestle with the darkness in the name of a greater good? He nodded, yet an internal battle raged. "I understand the risks," he replied, his voice firm. "But for my students, I'm willing to explore that darkness if it means bringing light to their futures." With this new resolve, Jonathan knew he was walking a dangerous path. A voice whispered in the recesses of his mind, reminding him of the inevitable struggle for integrity in a world fueled by corruption. Yet he had to believe this sacrifice could lead to something greater. As Jonathan left that bar, feeling the weight of his determination shift like a tectonic plate, he realized that the real transformation was just starting. But with each step he took deeper into Serafino's world, the question loomed larger: how long could he dance with shadows before becoming entrapped in their embrace? The answer felt just out of reach, thudding in time with his heartbeat, pulling him toward the next chapter of his inevitable transformation. Weeks passed, and the direct effects of Jonathan's decision began to ripple through his life like obstacles in a rushing stream. Each encounter with Serafino and the local leaders carved away at his old self, revealing aspects he never knew would emerge. He filled his notebook with strategic notes and observations, tracking the patterns of influence and the subtle power dynamics that governed every conversation and deal the leaders made. However, with each line written, a deeper anxiety rooted itself in his thoughts. Was he becoming someone he no longer recognized? While new ideas flowed through him like a fresh current, the quiet echoes of his core beliefs battled for clarity. He had invested so much in this clandestine pursuit that the deliberate choices he once made felt increasingly distant. One evening, as the wind howled through the barely insulated windows of his apartment, Jonathan busied himself shifting through his notebook when a message from Serafino popped onto his phone. "Meet tonight. Business to discuss." His heart raced. The frequency of their meetings was escalating, each one drawing him further down this path. When he arrived at the bar, Serafino leaned casually against the counter, his presence both commanding and disarming. The dim lights flickered above, accentuating the shadows that danced around them. "You look like you've been busy," Serafino remarked, a sly grin spreading across his face. "I have," Jonathan replied, attempting to mirror his nonchalance. "The strategies for community engagement are starting to take shape. I've been thinking about how I can leverage them in the classroom." "Remember, Jonathan, it's not just about leveraging. It's about who you're leveraging against," Serafino cautioned, his tone shifting from playful to serious. As they sat down, the aroma of whiskey mingled with the scent of bittersweet tobacco, enveloping them in an atmosphere thick with tension. "You need to understand the players. All these leaders have secrets, and they will use them against one another if it serves them. Knowledge is power, but knowing when to use it matters even more." Through Serafino's teachings, Jonathan felt drawn into a world alive with intrigue and a perverse thrill. He could see a tangible transformation taking root, skills nested in him felt on the verge of blossoming. Yet beneath the surface, unease began to spiral. What would he have to compromise to truly gain this knowledge? Days drifted into kaleidoscopic weeks, wrapped in layers of lessons and manipulations. At school, Jonathan's teaching style evolved. He began implementing techniques he had observed from leaders around town, engaging students more in discussions, encouraging them to assert their voices. His classroom buzzed with energy, students began to flourish, embracing ideas they once hesitated to explore. Each success fueled his desire for empowerment yet begged deeper questions about his methods. Gradually, he noticed whispers among his colleagues, skepticism mingling with anxiety over his changing persona. Behind their gazes, he could comprehend their unease had he crossed an invisible line. An articulate version of himself unsettled them, they sensed the fire igniting within him, yet they could not fathom its source. One afternoon, he found himself alone in the faculty lounge, wrestling with his growing disconnect. The shadows loomed larger, threatening the light he sought to spread through education. Was he truly leading his students onward, or was he forging chains that bound them to a world of shadows? As the evening crept closer, Jonathan turned back toward the bar where Serafino awaited. Clarity electrified him, the confrontation with his own values was long overdue. It was time to evaluate how deep his ambition was willing to sink into this labyrinth of choices, where morality could slip between the cracks of ambition. His heart thudded with questions as the bar door swung open. What would he reveal about himself tonight? And as he stepped into the warmth and darkness of the bar, Jonathan felt the magnetic pull of fate. And the weight of his own past coalesce into something undeniable. One decision would lead to another, and suddenly, he faced an urgency he never anticipated. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and he could no longer hide from the shadows. What would the truth demand from him next? Jonathan pushed through the bar door, the roar of laughter and conversation washing over him like a tide. The low hum of the place contrasted sharply with the intensity of his inner turmoil. He spotted Serafino at a secluded table, his aura commanding attention even amidst the swirling chaos. There was no time for hesitation now. Taking a deep breath, Jonathan slid into the chair opposite Serafino. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, forcing a measure of calm into his voice, though the tremors of anxiety rippled beneath the surface. "Always," Serafino replied, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. "We have critical matters to discuss. Your progress has been noted, both good and bad." The weight of his words struck Jonathan like a hammer, puncturing the thin layer of confidence he wore like armor. "I'm encountering some resistance at the school," Jonathan admitted, choosing his words carefully. My colleagues, they're becoming unsettled. They see something different in me, something unsettling. Serafino leaned back, his fingers steepled, contemplating. And you're uncomfortable with their discomfort? You need to remember, growth comes at a cost. The question is, are you willing to pay it? The room seemed to constrict around Jonathan. He felt splintered, caught between the burgeoning teacher who inspired students and this dark, beguiling persona that Serafino embodied. Both paths intoxicated him with potential yet terrified him with their implications. I'm not sure I want to become someone who thrives on manipulation, Jonathan confessed, the honesty seeping into his tone. I want to empower my students, not control them. Why not both? Serafino's voice had shifted again, his casual demeanor evaporating. Leverage the power dynamics. Inspire them in ways they don't even recognize. Isn't that how leaders are born? Jonathan felt a flicker of clarity pierce through his fog of doubt. A nagging voice reminded him of the responsibility he bore. Leadership was not just about influence, it was about integrity, right? Yet the thrill of navigating this treacherous landscape tugged at his ambition fiercely. What if he was meant for more than just the mold of a traditional educator? So, you want me to manipulate them? He asked, the words clinging to him like fog. There was an edge of rebellion in his tone that he didn't intend but welcomed. This was the confrontation he needed, a chance to wrestle with his principles head-on. Manipulation is just a tool, Jonathan, Serafino responded, leaning forward, his presence suddenly heavy. Orchestrate the narrative. It's an act of survival in a world that feeds on weakness. You wish for change. You'll need a strategy. 1,000 thoughts coursed through his mind. Ideas of how to balance engagement with control clashed like titans. Jonathan unearthed a new sense of purpose, but it came tangled with moral dilemmas. Was teaching his students to navigate their environments and influence the world around them merely a facade for wielding power? And what if I discovered something about myself that I'm not ready to embrace? The more I learn from you, the more it feels like I'm standing on a precipice. Looking down, Jonathan shot back, the fire kindling beneath him. The truth of it all, how far does one go? Ah, but the answer lies in the fear itself. Fear reveals what is worth pursuing, Serafino said, a hint of admiration flaring in his eyes. Just then, Jonathan's phone buzzed, a message that shifted his focus. It was a request from a student. A plea for help. They felt lost amid the swirling avenues of life. There it was, his catalyst. Faced with this young soul in need, the urgency within him surged. Tonight, Serafino, I need to forge my own path, Jonathan said firmly, a newfound resolve stringing his thoughts together. One that doesn't compromise my values. Serafino's expression morphed into one of respect. Very well. But remember, decisions have repercussions, and sometimes, your greatest power is the strength to stand firm in your truth. As Jonathan walked out of the bar that night, a fierce serenity enveloped him. The tension between ambition and integrity still raged within, but clarity was dawning. He was determined to build a way forward, crafting his influence with an unwavering moral compass. However, the open question loomed: what shadows would emerge as he navigated this new territory? With those thoughts pulsating in his mind, he opened the door, ready to confront his students. The reckoning of his ideals awaited him. What challenges would he have to face to maintain his conviction? Jonathan's footsteps echoed against the pavement as he approached the school, heart racing in sync with the determined rhythm of his resolve. The winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to dance alongside him, a tangible representation of the dual paths looming before him. The choices he'd made, his alliance with Serafino, the strategic observations he'd taken note of, the manipulation he had begun to contemplate, all were secrets swirling in a tempest. But today, he would step into the classroom not as a harbinger of fear, but as a beacon of hope. He entered the building, greeted by the familiar but welcomed sounds of students bustling about. Instantly, he felt the swell of purpose rising within. These young minds were not merely future leaders, but the present embodiment of resilience and potential. He recalled the despair that once surrounded him and contrasted it with the possibilities he could ignite within these walls. The instant he entered the classroom, the chatter hushed and turned into expectant murmurs. "Good morning, everyone," he said, feeling the magnetic pull of their attention. Instead of diving into history, Jonathan took a detour. He wanted to discuss their futures, their ambitions, and their fears. "Today, I want to talk about power, what it means and how we can use it," he began, immaculate clarity threading his speech. The eyes of the students sparkled with curiosity, drawing him closer into their world. They were eager for guidance, not just in what history had taught, but how they might defy their circumstances, the very essence of their existence. He expertly wove themes of resilience, ethical leadership, and the duality of power throughout their discourse. Jonathan facilitated an open dialogue, encouraging them to voice their thoughts on what it meant to wield influence responsibly. As they shared stories, laughter erupted, but there were also confessions of vulnerability, stories of feeling powerless, stifled by societal pressures and expectations. "Your voice matters," Jonathan proclaimed, feeling a sense of invigoration. "These walls may feel like they confine you, but they can also cradle your ambitions. And you have the power within you to shape the narrative." Hours slipped away unnoticed, each interaction campfire-like in warmth, as the students began to embrace the reality that they could influence their own destinies. Jonathan felt invigorated with every dynamic exchange. He was crafting a curriculum that instilled not just knowledge, but wisdom. After the class concluded, as students trickled out, one approached, their eyes wide with emotion. "Mr. Jonathan," they said, faltering. "I didn't realize it was possible to think like that. Thank you for believing in us." Jonathan's heart swelled, the gratification of tangible impact surging through him. This moment encapsulated the nexus of his journey. He had not simply taught a lesson today but ignited a path toward empowerment for this student. Though of Serafino, could he synthesize the strategic acumen he had learned with the integrity he was trying to uphold? That evening, Jonathan returned to his modest apartment, the hum of hope echoing in the air around him. He sat down with a fresh notebook, flipping to a clean page. The accomplishments of the day encouraged a torrent of new ideas, bubbling with energy. Here, he crafted a curriculum that tethered the knowledge of history with lessons on ethical influence. Days became weeks, and with each passing moment, Jonathan was evolving not into a reflection of Serafino, but into a leader who would exhibit strength through vulnerability, shaping futures without shrouding himself in darkness. And while chaotic influences tugged at him, Jonathan established boundaries rooted in his resolve to protect the integrity of his students while forging his own growth. Then came recognition. The principal approached him with a mixture of admiration and concern, having observed the electric change in the classroom dynamics. "You're making waves, Jonathan. Just make sure those waves don't pull you under." "Thank you," Jonathan replied, acknowledging the shadows that still lingered but also feeling a reaffirmation of his commitment. He was no longer merely a teacher caught in circumstance. He had honed a vision that resonated with authenticity. The scars of his journey remained, but they were now etched as testaments to his growth. With each passing class, Jonathan solidified his role not just as an educator but as an architect of resilience within the community. Honors soon followed. He was invited to speak at local events, championed as an emblem of transformation, a testament to the power of education when rooted in solidarity with integrity. Jonathan stood at the cusp of triumph, a man reborn, securing not just his position but solid confidence in his ability to influence others for the better. He turned back momentarily to reflect on the man he had been amidst the shadows, acknowledging the growth contained within the conflicts he had weathered. The defining moment eventually came when he received an award for excellence in teaching from a prominent educational body. As he stood before the crowd, vulnerability was illuminated in triumph. "This isn't just my achievement, it's ours," he declared, looking intently at his students. "You inspire me, never forget that." The moment encapsulated his journey. Jonathan had faced darkness, danced with shadows, yet emerged with clarity, purpose, and unwavering conviction in the integrity of his own character. In his heart, he knew true change began with the simple truth that every individual possesses the power to uplift and shape better futures. Jonathan took a deep breath, acknowledging the intertwining paths of ambition and morality, standing proud amidst the memories of a once shattered existence, a new legacy firmly established. The cultivation of his journey was a testament to the power of education, the most profound tool for empowerment, one that he would wield fiercely for the betterment of every young mind. Now, as we reflect on Jonathan's incredible transformation, we invite you to solidify your commitment to these powerful stories of personal triumph. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire and transform. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure more people witness these uplifting journeys. Comment your reactions and theories about Jonathan's incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and embrace their own paths toward fulfillment. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories grasp the vital importance of supporting the channel through these actions.